the heart of this nation, under skies so blue,
there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true.
from the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe.
Welcome, deep divers. We've all seen it, haven't we? Those headlines that just explode online.
Oh, absolutely. They seem to be everywhere now.
Yeah, like maybe a respected academic, someone digs up a tweet from 10 years ago.
Right, something may be edgy then, but now.
Exactly. And suddenly there's this huge public outcry, calls for them to be fired.
And often they actually lose their job. Or think about a celebrity.
Makes one careless comment.
Just one slip up, maybe thoughtless, and boom. Their whole career seems to just hang by a thread.
It sparks these incredibly intense debates, doesn't it? And it always seems to boil down to this core question.
Is it accountability?
Or is it cancellation? When does, demanding justice just turn into trying to completely erase someone?
That's the million-dollar question.
Okay, let's unpack this. What does it really mean to hold someone accountable versus, to cancel them?
Big difference, potentially.
Huge. So today, we're really going to dig into this distinction. We're using some great source material here.
Yeah. What have we got?
It's an excerpt by the nonfiction book writer Samuel Carter. It's titled, When Accountability Isn't Cancellation. And he published it over on Substack.
Ah, Carter. Okay, interesting. He tends to be quite thorough.
Exactly. So our mission today is to really dissect the framework Carter lays out. We want to help you, our listeners, navigate these really blurry lines.
Understand the when and the isn't, as Carter puts it.
Precisely. And we'll keep coming back to that scenario, the academic with the old tweet. Let's use that as a kind of test case for Carter's ideas.
Sounds like a plan. And it's so important because, honestly, what strikes me here is just how easily these terms get thrown around.
Oh, completely. Weaponized even?
Exactly. Accountability, cancellation, they become labels, weapons in arguments. And getting a clear, systematic distinction is just crucial if we want productive dialogue.
Especially when emotions run so high.
And boy, do they run high on this topic. Few things generate more heat, right?
Definitely.
And when that happens, precise language, careful thinking, it often just goes out the window.
Yeah, it gets lost in the noise.
That's exactly where someone like Samuel Carter, with his background in serious nonfiction, can really help us.
Because he's not just reacting.
Right. He's not interested in the sensationalism, the drama of it all. He's trying to provide actual frameworks, bring some clarity.
Tools to think with.
Yes. Urging us to think critically about what these words really mean, the impact they have on people's lives, on society.
Stakes are incredibly high.
It really couldn't be higher. It affects careers, reputations, public discourse itself.
I agree completely. It really is like trying to, navigate a complex legal case, but everyone's using a different rule book.
That's a great analogy. Total chaos.
We just have to define our terms carefully.
Yeah.
So let's start with accountability. That seems like the more established concept, maybe.
Generally speaking, yes.
So when we talk about holding someone accountable, what are we really trying to achieve? How does that process ideally work? What's the core meaning beyond just, someone got in trouble?
Okay, so stepping back, looking at the bigger picture. Accountability, I think, is deeply rooted in this basic human need for social cohesion, for justice.
Okay, so it's about keeping society functioning.
In a fundamental way, yes. And crucially, it's not just about punishment. That's a key point Carter likely emphasizes. It carries this inherent focus on addressing the root cause or the actual impact of an action.
Right, getting to the why and the what happened next.
Exactly. So at its most basic level, it means someone acknowledging responsibility for what they did, taking ownership.
Okay.
And then facing consequences that are, appropriate, and ideally geared towards repair or learning.
Repair or learning, that sounds constructive.
It aims to be. And Carter, I imagine, would really drive home the point that true accountability isn't just about external pressure. It's not just about being forced to pay a price.
What else is it then?
It's also about fostering an internal acknowledgement, a genuine understanding of the impact your actions have.
Ah, so it's about really getting it.
Yes. Getting it. Because without that internal shift, any external consequence, any punishment, it can just feel hollow. Or worse, like persecution.
That makes a huge difference, doesn't it? It's not just a knee-jerk reaction or some kind of forced apology. There's a deeper purpose there.
A much deeper intent.
So if we move beyond just taking responsibility, what are those main goals? You mentioned repair, learning. What else is tied up in genuine accountability? I'm thinking like correction, upholding standards.
Precisely. You've hit the key ones.
Yeah.
The goals are definitely multifaceted, and they're all interconnected. First, absolutely, correction and repair.
Okay.
This means actively addressing the harm that was caused, learning from the mistake, and crucially, taking actual steps to fix the behavior if possible.
So it's active, not passive.
Very active. It's much more than just saying, I'm sorry. It involves concrete actions to make amends. Think of it like mending a tear in the social fabric.
Rather than just cutting out the damaged bit.
Exactly. You're trying to weave it back together. So an apology, in this view, isn't just words. It needs to come with a real commitment to change, maybe restitution, maybe working to prevent it happening again. It's a process, not a single event.
So it's about restoration then, or at least creating a path towards it for the person and the people affected.
Exactly. And, it might be a spectrum. Sometimes full restoration isn't possible, depending on the harm.
Sure.
But the intent to repair, that drive towards making things right, should be there in genuine accountability.
Okay, that makes sense. What else?
Then there's the absolutely critical goal of upholding standards.
Right, setting boundaries.
Yes. When someone is genuinely held accountable, it sends a really clear message. This is what's acceptable, this is what's not acceptable within our community, our organization, our society.
It reinforces the rules of the game.
It does. It affirms our shared values, our ethical lines, our collective norms. It basically draws the guardrails for behavior, which you need for any group to function well.
Okay, repair, standards. What was the third one?
Growth and education. This is huge. Accountability offers this invaluable chance to learn.
For the person who messed up.
Yes, but crucially, not just for them, for the whole community.
Ah, interesting. How so?
It's a chance for everyone to understand the ripple effects of actions, to learn from the misstep collectively, to maybe update our understanding or our practices. It helps the whole group become more resilient, more just, hopefully.
That's a really powerful way to frame it, not just about punishment, but collective learning.
Absolutely.
And this makes me think about those big debates around, punitive versus restorative justice. How does that fit into Carter's likely view of accountability? Are they like competing ideas or part of the same thing?
That's a really important distinction, and I suspect Carter would argue they represent different underlying philosophies of justice.
Okay.
Punitive accountability, its main focus is punishment. That's a central consequence. The goals are usually deterrence, stopping others from doing the same thing, and retribution.
Like an eye for an eye, sort of?
In a way, yeah. Making sure the wrongdoer pays a price that feels proportional to what they did. It's about strict rule enforcement.
And restorative.
Restorative justice shifts the focus significantly. It centers on repairing the harm, not just to the direct victim, but to the community connections that were broken.
Okay, broader focus.
Much broader. And it actively involves the person who caused the harm in the process of making amends. It emphasizes dialogue, reconciliation, maybe finding a way to reintegrate them rather than just kicking them out.
So where does Carter likely land on this?
My guess is Carter would suggest that while they have different priorities, true effective accountability often needs to strike a balance.
Not purely one or the other.
Right. It needs to acknowledge that consequences are necessary, boundaries matter. But it should also keep an eye on the possibility of repair, of learning, of finding a path forward. It's about calibrating the response.
Tailoring it to the situation.
Exactly. Recognizing that being purely punitive can sometimes just shut down healing. But being purely restorative might sometimes ignore the need for clear consequences and protecting standards.
Yeah.
It's complex.
It really is. It demands a lot of wisdom, actually. So if these are the goals, the purposes of accountability, how do we actually do it? What are the mechanisms? The formal systems and maybe the less formal ways.
Right. How does it happen on the ground? Well, we have established avenues. Formally, you've got structures like our legal system.
Courts, police.
Exactly. Enforcing laws, administering justice. Then within companies, you have HR processes.
Right.
For workplace issues.
Harassment policies, codes of conduct.
Precisely. You also have professional ethics boards for doctors, lawyers, accountants upholding standards in specific fields, and then just tons of official policies governing behavior everywhere.
Okay, so the official rule books.
Yes. And these are usually characterized by having set procedures, for investigations, for making judgments, for applying consequences.
There's a process.
There's supposed to be a process. Their strength, ideally, is consistency, fairness through due process, a clear chain of command. even if, let's be honest, they don't always live up to that ideal in practice.
Sure, they can be flawed.
Of course. But Carter would likely emphasize that these systems, flaws and all, represent our collective attempt to create order and justice through agreed-upon rules.
Right, so things like a court hearing and an internal HR investigation, maybe a medical board reviewing a doctor's actions.
Exactly, those kinds of things. But then, and Carter would definitely highlight this, we also have these incredibly powerful, informal social processes.
Okay, what does that look like?
These are less structured, but they can be just as impactful, sometimes more so. Think about community expectations, direct feedback from your peers, social pressure.
Like friends calling you out on something.
Yes, or a neighborhood group expressing disappointment in a local leader. Or the expectation that someone who caused harm should offer a public apology or make reparations.
Ah, okay. The court of public opinion, but maybe on a smaller scale?
Sometimes, yes. Or just within a specific group. And these informal ways, while they lack the rigid structure of the formal systems, they usually operate within a shared understanding of norms and values. Carter might point out that even these informal processes often have some kind of unwritten protocol.
Like, you expect an apology or you expect someone to change their behavior after being called out.
Exactly. There's an expectation of a response, of some kind of resolution. And the way these formal and informal systems interact is really fascinating.
How so?
Well, Carter might argue that the formal systems provide the backbone, the structure, but the informal processes are more like the nerve endings of society.
Sensing and reacting quickly.
Yes, constantly sensing and reacting to behavior that goes against community standards. And often these informal reactions can influence whether formal action is taken or how legitimate that formal action feels.
Huh. That's interesting. So if we try to picture an ideal accountable process, pulling all this together, what would it look like? What characteristics would Carter say are essential for it to really work?
Okay, ideally, an accountable process, as Carter would likely frame it. First, it needs clear communication about the transgression.
No ambiguity.
None. The person needs to understand exactly what they did wrong, why it was wrong, and the specific impact it had. Otherwise, how can they truly learn?
Makes sense. What else?
Second, the consequences need to be proportional to the harm or the violation.
The punishment fits the crime, basically.
Yes, but Carter might add a crucial nuance here. Proportionality isn't just about how severe the consequence is right now. It's also about its duration.
How long it lasts.
Exactly. And is there a pathway back, a pathway to reintegration? A consequence that lasts forever for a mistake made long ago or for a temporary lapse might become disproportionate over time.
Okay, so severity, duration, and potential for return.
Those dimensions are key. And thirdly, vitally important, there should usually be room for a genuine response, an explanation. And as we said, a clear path towards redemption or reintegration.
Acknowledging people kinship.
Yes. It acknowledges human fallibility, our capacity to learn and change. And it recognizes the value for society in allowing people to make amends and rejoin the community or profession, often with new understanding, new responsibilities, of course.
Right, not just wiping the slate clean necessarily.
No, but allowing for growth.
Yeah.
Carter pushes us, I think, to look beyond just punishment towards the health of both the individual and the community.
That sounds like a very measured, thoughtful approach, focused on growth, repair.
Oh,
okay, now let's pivot.
Okay.
Because here's where it gets really interesting and often really messy. This is where all the confusion, the emotional heat, the public spectacle often comes in. Remember our academic with the old tweet?
Yep, waiting for that shoe to drop.
This is where that scenario really starts to take shape in a different way. So how do we define cancellation, or cancel culture, as people often call it? What does it look like today?
Yeah, and this really brings up an important question about power, doesn't it? Especially how power dynamics have shifted in the digital age.
How so?
Well, cancellation often seems to reflect this collective judgment, but it's often decentralized, almost chaotic sometimes.
Not coming from one clear authority.
Exactly. And its mechanisms feel way less structured than the accountability processes we just talked about. So commonly, cancellation is understood as this rapid, very public withdrawal of support.
For a person, a brand, whoever.
Right. And it often leads to this significant, sometimes devastating loss loss of reputation, loss of livelihood, loss of social standing. It's swift, it's overwhelming, and it often feels all-encompassing.
Like a tidal wave.
Very much like that.
Yeah.
Carter might argue it's less like a formal verdict being handed down and more like an immediate societal rejection, often turbocharged by how fast things go viral online.
And the intent behind it, or at least the perceived intent, because it feels so different from the corrective restorative goals you described for accountability.
It feels fundamentally different, yes. While accountability often aims for correction, repair, learning. Cancellation is frequently perceived at least as being primarily punitive.
Just pun it.
Often, yeah. Aiming for ostracization, maybe even permanent removal from public life or from their field. There's often this profound sense of disempowerment for the person being targeted.
And a lack of process.
A distinct lack of traditional due process. Those safeguards we expect investigation, the right to respond, an impartial judge, they're often just absent, bypassed.
Which can lead to
Consequences that feel wildly disproportionate or irreversible. And Carter would also definitely highlight the chilling effect.
people becoming afraid to speak.
Exactly. Individuals become genuinely fearful of expressing certain views, even nuanced ones, because they worry they might be the next target. They might say the wrong thing.
So they self-censor.
They do. And that fear, Carter would argue, stifles open debate, critical thinking. It pushes people towards silence or safe opinions, which isn't healthy for anyone. It creates this climate of anxiety where disagreement feels dangerous.
It really sounds like it can sometimes be driven by a kind of digital mob mentality. The outrage itself becomes the engine.
That can certainly be how it feels, and sometimes how it functions. The collective anger is the primary driver.
So how does this actually happen, practically speaking? What are the mechanisms of cancellation in our world today?
The mechanisms are almost entirely powered by digital mobilization. Carter likely outlines this meticulously. We're talking about social media campaigns that can spin up incredibly fast.
That hashtag takes off.
Exactly. A single post, a comment, a video clip goes viral. Then you get cascades of public shaming, coordinated boycotts of products or shows linked to the person, online petitions demanding they be fired or deplatformed.
And it happens incredibly fast.
Blindingly fast,
Yeah.
often reaching a global audience in hours or even minutes. And this digital storm then triggers what Carter might call rapid disavowal.
Meaning?
Institutions, employers, media platforms, sponsors, even former colleagues. They quickly distance themselves.
Cutting ties.
Yes. And it's not always purely out of moral outrage, right? It's often a strategic or commercial decision. Protect their own brand, avoid the backlash, limit financial damage.
Self-preservation.
Largely. And the speed, plus the decentralized, often leaderless nature of these movements. That's key. There isn't usually a formal committee making a decision. It's more like an emergent public consensus, often amorphous, forming with dizzying speed.
Fueled by clicks and shares.
And Carter would point out that social media algorithms often pour fuel on that fire, right? They favor sensationalism, high emotion, rapid engagement. That amplifies the outrage and makes it really hard for quieter, more nuanced takes to get any airtime.
It's a perfect storm for escalation. So if we were to list the characteristics of a cancellation process, how would it specifically differ from that structured, accountable process we talked about? Thinking about our academic again.
Okay, based on common patterns and what Carter likely highlights as key differences, a cancellation often kicks off with an immediate, almost visceral public outcry. Frequently starts online, fueled by passionate reactions spreading like wildfire.
Okay, immediate online firestorm.
Then the consequences for our academic could feel sudden, overwhelming, and potentially way out of proportion to, say, one tweet from a decade ago. Especially if the action wasn't illegal, wasn't causing direct harm in a tangible way, but was seen as insensitive or problematic by today's standards.
The standards might have shifted.
Exactly. And Carter might introduce an idea here like performative due process. Instead of a real investigation, what you get is public denunciation, demands for public apologies, maybe diversity training, and rapid professional consequences.
Yeah.
These become the substitute for a formal, fair process.
It looks like process, but isn't really.
It can feel like that. And here's another critical difference. The chance for a real explanation, a meaningful apology, or steps towards remediation, those might be severely limited or just flat out rejected by a significant part of the public.
Once the narrative sets in,
It's incredibly hard to shift. Once that online tide turns, once the story solidifies this person is bad, it can be almost impossible to reverse. Regardless of mitigating factors or sincere efforts to make amends, that digital footprint feels permanent and forgiveness
Well, it often seems in very short supply in these dynamics.
Wow. The public decides fast and hard, and that's that. So, okay, what does this mean for us trying to make sense of things? How do we practically tell the difference? When are we seeing real accountability? And when is it tipping over into cancellation? What are those key differentiating factors Carter urges us to look for?
This is where it gets fascinating because the line can be incredibly fine, right? And the when is it accountability, when isn't, it often hinges on a really careful assessment of intent, process, and outcome.
Okay.
Carter's fundamental question here, I imagine, is what's the ultimate goal driving this? Is it correction and repair? Or is it eradication and removal?
Correction versus eradication. That's stark.
It is. And one of the biggest differentiators Carter likely underscores is the proportionality of the consequence. We talked about that a bit.
Yes, but let's sharpen it. In accountability, consequences are ideally aligned with the actual severity of the offense. They aim for restoration or a penalty that genuinely fits the harm caused.
Like our academic losing their job for recent, proven, harmful professional misconduct might feel proportionate.
Possibly, yes, depending on the specifics. But Carter, I think, makes a really compelling case that true proportionality isn't just about that initial severity. It's also critically about the duration of the consequence.
How long it lasts.
Exactly. And is there a path back? He argued many cancellations fail miserably on this duration aspect. They create permanent exile, irreparable career damage, sometimes for a single misstep, or a comment from years ago viewed through today's lens.
That permanence feels key.
He'd likely say it's a crucial divergence. Classic accountability usually allows for a period of atonement, learning, and eventual reentry, even if things aren't exactly the same. Cancellation often slams that door shut, permanently.
That distinction really hits home. It's about the punishment fitting the crime, yes, but also for a period that allows for change, not forever closing all doors.
Precisely.
And what about that idea of a second chance? The opportunity to learn, to grow? That felt central to accountability, but maybe absent in cancellation.
That's another vital difference Carter would surely highlight. Accountability, done well, often includes that pathway, a way for the individual to acknowledge what they did, make amends, demonstrate change, and potentially reintegrate.
Like restorative justice circles aim for.
Exactly. The whole point there is often healing the breach, bringing people back into the community fold. Cancellation, conversely, often feels unforgiving, like a permanent removal.
No room for error.
Often very little room for growth or for changing your views or behavior, especially if the public narrative has already condemned you. Carter might suggest that a society without pathways to redemption becomes brittle, unforgiving. It might even hinder genuine moral progress because people are too scared to admit mistakes or evolve.
And the process itself. Accountability had formal structures, due process. Does cancellation have anything like that? Or is it just different?
Fundamentally different in its logic. Accountability usually involves established procedures, right? Investigation, review, a chance for the accused to respond. There's an attempt at due process, even if flawed, to ensure fairness and get the full picture.
Hearing all sides.
Yes. Carter would emphasize that due process, even informally, implies a willingness to hear all sides. Cancellation, though. It frequently just bypasses all that.
How?
It relies heavily on public opinion, rapid judgments fueled by online sentiment, social media consensus, which just by its nature can lack transparency, impartiality, basic fairness.
Trial by internet.
That's exactly the phrase Carter might use. Often without a jury, without a judge, sometimes without even clear charges being laid out. And certainly without those traditional safeguards that protect people from summary judgment.
So it really is the court of public opinion versus an actual court or HR process, which means the underlying intent must be different too, right? If the processes are so radically different.
Absolutely. The intent behind accountability is generally about fostering justice, repairing harm, maintaining collective standards that are understood and agreed upon. It's about the health and integrity of the system, the group.
Okay.
Cancellation. Well, while it sometimes springs from a genuine desire for justice or to address real harm, its outcome is often perceived as mainly punitive.
Just punishment and removal.
Yeah, aiming for ostracization, silencing, permanent removal from a platform or position. Carter might argue the focus often shifts away from actually addressing the problematic behavior and its impact, toward simply removing the person. Whether or not that removal actually leads to systemic change or just satisfies public anger in the moment.
That framework is incredibly helpful for seeing the isn't. Now let's flip it. Let's explore the when. What are the specific contexts, the factors that tend to push something towards being seen as accountability versus cancellation, especially through Carter's lens?
Yeah, and this brings up that important question about responsibility, doesn't it? The responsibility of the accusers, the accused, the platforms, the public. Context shapes everything here.
It really does.
How an event unfolds, how it's perceived. It all depends heavily on context. Consider the nature of the offense itself.
Okay.
Accountability feels more clearly applicable usually to straightforward violations of established rules, ethical codes, legal statutes, professional standards, or actions causing direct, demonstrable harm.
Like fraud, harassment, malpractice.
Exactly. Things where there are clear, predefined boundaries that were crossed. Cancellation, on the other hand, often gets triggered by muckier things. Controversial opinions. Perceived insensitivity. Past actions resurfacing, like our academic's tweet. Actions that spark widespread public outrage, even if they aren't strictly illegal or causing harm in a legal sense.
So the lines are blurrier.
Much blurrier, Carter would highlight, which makes it way harder to apply clear, consistent standards. The harm in cancellation can often be more about offense or damage to reputation rather than tangible injury that can be measured.
So it's not always about breaking a written rule. Sometimes it's breaking an unwritten social code or a moral one that maybe changes over time.
Precisely. And that connects directly to the next factor, transparency and communication.
How clearly things are stated.
Yes. Accountability, by its nature, really requires clear communication. What was the transgression? What needs to happen to make it right? There's ideally a clear statement of the issue.
Okay.
Cancellation, unfortunately, can really thrive in ambiguity. Rumor, one-sided stories, incomplete narratives can take hold, and there's often very limited opportunity for the accused person to clarify or offer their perspective.
Misinformation spreads fast.
Incredibly fast. Carter would argue that misinformation or just partial information can quickly become entrenched as fact in social media echo chambers. It makes it almost impossible for the target to defend themselves effectively or for the wider public to get a balanced view. The speed just outruns the truth sometimes.
That lack of clarity must just pour fuel on the fire, escalating things. What about power dynamics? Does it matter who's doing the calling out and who's being targeted?
Power dynamics are absolutely crucial. Carter likely digs into this with a lot of nuance. Accountability, traditionally, is often wielded by institutions or systems with formal power over individuals.
Top-down, employer over employee, state over citizen.
Exactly. It's the application of established rules by those in authority. Cancellation, though, this is where it gets complicated and interesting. It can sometimes be initiated by those with less formal power.
Like marginalized groups, social media users.
Yes, against people in positions of significant power, maybe trying to hold them accountable when traditional systems have failed. Think about grassroots movements exposing injustice. That can be empowering.
Okay, so it can be a tool for the less powerful.
It can be. But, and this is critical, it can also be wielded by powerful groups or huge segments of the population against less powerful individuals. So it creates this really complex, often uneven playing field.
It's not always David versus Goliath.
Not at all. Carter might suggest that cancellation itself has become this potent informal tool that can shift power balances, yes, but it's not always applied consistently or used for genuinely just purposes. Sometimes, as you hinted, it's Goliath wielding a new kind of weapon.
And finally, what about the audience and scope of the reaction? How does that play into the accountability versus cancellation distinction?
The audience and scope are significantly different, and Carter would likely pinpoint this as a key reason for the sheer intensity of cancellation. Accountability often concerns a specific context.
Like a workplace, a university, a legal jurisdiction.
Right. The consequences, even if serious, are usually contained within that sphere. For our academic, formal accountability might mean sanctions from their department or a university ethics review. The impact is mainly on their academic career.
Okay.
Cancellation, though, it tends to have this much broader audience, often global, amorphous, driven by online virality and public sentiment that crosses borders.
What starts local goes global.
Instantly. A tweet in one country can become an international incident overnight. The consequences can spiral far beyond the original context or the community that first reacted. Carter would highlight how the sheer scale, the speed, the permanence of digital information just amplifies the impact dramatically.
Because once it's online,
it's almost impossible to erase. It leads to this kind of digital exile that traditional accountability rarely, if ever, imposes.
Wow. It really does paint a vivid, almost chilling picture of these two dynamics. Okay, let's think about the source itself for a moment. We're using this excerpt from When Accountability Isn't Cancellation by Samuel Carter, the nonfiction book writer, on Substack. Given his background, what kind of perspective or approach would you expect him to bring? He's not just firing off an opinion piece.
Right, and that's key. What's fascinating here is the methodology a serious nonfiction writer like Carter brings to the table. He's not just reporting events, he's analyzing, he's synthesizing information, he's meticulously building a coherent argument.
Okay, so it's structured, thought through.
Deeply structured, likely evidence-informed. He's looking at how these two concepts, accountability and cancellation, diverge. And rather than just taking an emotional stance or picking a side, Carter would almost certainly aim for depth over dogma. Meaning thorough research, balanced arguments, acknowledge of the complexities, the gray areas, and a really nuanced exploration of these tricky social phenomena. He's not just telling you what happened in some cases.
He's explaining the mechanics.
Exactly. Why it happened, how these processes function, and most importantly, what it all means for us, for individuals, for society. His goal is likely to give you, the listener, the tools for your own critical analysis.
So he's giving us thinking tools, frameworks, not just stories or hot takes.
That's precisely what I'd expect. Conceptual frameworks, maybe specific criteria you can use to assess real-world situations. He's giving you a lens.
Like a checklist almost?
Maybe something like that.
Right.
Perhaps he introduces a consequence matrix that helps you assess proportionality based on duration, scope, future impact. Or maybe a redemption rubric, outlining tangible steps towards making amends, things that provide structure for analysis.
That sounds really practical.
And furthermore, as a nonfiction writer committed to depth, Carter would inherently be encouraging critical thinking, pushing us to question the easy narratives, look at the underlying motivations on all sides, consider the broader societal impacts beyond the immediate firestorm.
Look beneath the surface.
Yes, challenge our own knee-jerk reactions and invite us into a more considered, thoughtful space.
And the platform choice Substack, what does that tell us? It feels like a deliberate move for this kind of topic.
It does feel deliberate. And if we connect that choice to the bigger picture, choosing Substack suggests a very specific intent, I think, to reach a thoughtful, engaged audience, people willing to actually grapple with complex ideas, maybe trying to get outside the usual echo chambers where these discussions often get stuck.
Right, escaping the shouting match.
Exactly. Substack lets writers like Carter connect directly with readers, often fostering deeper engagement. It supports longer-form content, more investigative work, more analytically rich pieces than you might find in traditional media with tight word counts and pressure for instant clicks.
It's built for nuance, not just sound bites.
Precisely. It gives them a platform for potentially in-depth, maybe even contrarian or specialized analysis without the same editorial constraints or commercial pressures you might find elsewhere.
So he can really explore the subtleties.
He can dive into the nuances of intent, process, outcome, without having to oversimplify for a mass audience. And often, Substack builds a real community around a writer's work. The comment section can become a place for genuine, thoughtful discussion.
People engaging with the ideas.
Yes, engaging with Carter's ideas and with each other, which aligns perfectly with what we try to do here on the Deep Dive, right?
Yeah.
Foster deeper understanding, encourage critical dialogue. It suggests Carter is writing for people who really want to think more deeply about these issues, not just react.
Right. Absolutely. Well, this deep dive has really shone a light on the vital differences, sometimes subtle, sometimes stark, between accountability and cancellation. So, wrapping this up, what does it all mean for us navigating this intense online world?
Means the difference isn't just words, is it?
Not at all. It has huge real-world implications for how we define justice, how we think about redemption, how we shape public discourse. We've really unpacked accountability as this more structured process, taking responsibility, aiming for repair, proportional consequences, including that crucial path back, and upholding standards.
With an emphasis on process and learning.
Right, and we've contrasted that sharply with cancellation, that rapid, often decentralized public shaming, consequences that can feel disproportionate, permanent, lacking due process, leaving little room for apology or change. Our academic, with that old tweet, they could easily get caught in that cancellation dynamic, couldn't they?
Easily. Which leads us to, I think, an important question for you, our listener, to really sit with.
Okay, let's hear it.
In this world we live in now, hyper-connected, where outrage can mobilize instantly, How can we collectively ensure that when we seek justice, it actually leads to genuine accountability and repair?
Instead of
Just amplifying public anger and contributing to this culture of, well, permanent dismissal. It really comes down to how we choose to react, how we engage, how we interpret these incredibly complex events playing out online and offline.
do we jump on the bandwagon or do we pause?
Do we seek to understand the full context? Are we aiming to facilitate correction and maybe rebuild bridges? Or are we just looking to condemn and erase? Your role in this, how you talk about these things, how you consume information, it's actually far more significant than you might realize.
How's the challenges?
Keep questioning. Keep trying to distinguish between intent and outcome, between process and pile-on. Keep seeking that deeper understanding. And remember, perhaps, that a truly just society has to find ways to both uphold its standards and allow for human error, for growth, for the possibility of redemption.